Hello and welcome to English with Ryan. You have been learning English the wrong way your entire life, and it's not your fault. Let that sink in, because what I'm about to say might change everything you believe about learning English. Think about a child. They don't study grammar. They don't memorize vocabulary lists. They don't translate sentences in their heads. And yet, bores. By the age of 5, they can understand, they can speak, they can express emotions naturally. Now look at yourself. Years of studying, countless lessons, endless exercises, and still, you hesitate. When someone speaks to you in English, why? What went wrong? Here's the truth. You were taught to study English instead of acquiring it. Your brain doesn't learn language through rules. It learns through exposure, through repetition, through meaning. But most systems force you to do the opposite. They tell you to analyze first, to speak before you're ready, to translate everything. And what does that create? Pressure, fear, confusion. So you start thinking, maybe I'm just bad at English. But listen carefully. You are not bad at English. You were trained in a way that goes against how your brain works. Imagine forcing a child to memorize verb tables before hearing real language. They would struggle too. The difference is, children are allowed to listen first, to absorb patterns, to build confidence, to learn without pressure. Now ask yourself, what if you could do the same? What if you stopped forcing yourself to speak too early? What if you focused on understanding first? What if English felt natural instead of stressful? In this series, you're going to relearn English the right way. No pressure, no confusion, no outdated methods, just a system that works with your brain. So if you're ready to stop struggling and finally start understanding, keep listening, because everything you thought you knew is about to change. Chapter 2. How the brain actually learns language. Your brain is not designed to learn language through rules. It's designed to absorb it quietly, gradually, automatically, before a child ever speaks. Their brain has already built a deep understanding of the language, not consciously, but subconsciously. They hear sounds again and again. They connect those sounds to meaning, a voice, a gesture, a situation. No translation, no explanation, just connection. This is how language enters the brain, through understanding, not through memorization. When you hear a sentence and understand it directly, your brain stores it as a whole, not as separate words, not as grammar rules, but as a pattern. And patterns are everything, because language is not a collection of words. It's a system of patterns, used again and again. Children don't learn word by word. They learn chunk by chunk. I want this. Give me that. I don't like it. These are not built from grammar. They are absorbed from repetition. Now, here's where most adults struggle. They try to understand everything logically. They break sentences apart. They analyze structure. And in doing so, they interrupt the natural process. Because the brain doesn't need full analysis to learn. It needs clarity of meaning. If you understand the general idea, that's enough. Your brain will handle the details over time. So instead of asking, what does every word mean? Start asking, do I understand? What's happening? That shift changes everything. Because once meaning is clear, the brain starts building patterns automatically, without effort, without stress. And the more you hear those patterns, the stronger they become, until one day they feel familiar, not because you memorize them, but because you've experienced them again and again. This is how language becomes natural, not through thinking, but through exposure. That makes sense. Chapter 3. Why speaking? Too early slows you down. There is a hidden mistake almost every learner makes. They try to speak too soon. It feels logical. If you want to speak English, you should practice speaking. But your brain doesn't work like that. Speaking is not the beginning of learning. It's the result of it. When you try to speak without enough input, your brain has nothing to use. So what happens? You pause. You search for words. You translate. Everything feels slow, not because you lack effort, but because you lack material. Your brain cannot produce what it hasn't absorbed. Think about it this way. Speaking is like playing music. You cannot improvise. If you've never heard the melody, you cannot express what you don't recognize. Children understand this. Without thinking, they don't rush to speak. They stay silent. But their brain is building a system. They are collecting sounds, patterns, intonation. So when they finally speak, it feels natural, not forced. Adults skip this stage. They push output before input is ready, and that creates tension. You feel pressure to be correct. You feel afraid to make mistakes. You become self-aware of every word, and that blocks fluency. Because fluency is not about thinking faster. It's about not thinking at all. It's about having patterns ready in your mind so words can flow without effort. And that only happens when your brain has enough exposure. So instead of forcing yourself to speak, reduce the pressure. Let speaking come when it's ready. You don't need to stop completely, but you need to stop forcing it. If words come naturally, use them. If they don't, let them stay inside. Because every moment you spend understanding, you are preparing for future speaking. And when the time comes, you won't need to push. Your brain will already know what to do, and speaking will feel like a continuation of understanding, not a separate skill. Chapter 4. Build a constant stream of English around you. Your brain changes based on what it hears every day, not what you study occasionally, not what you review once, but what you are exposed to consistently. If English appears only for a short moment, your brain treats it as unimportant, something temporary, something optional, and it never fully adapts. But when English becomes part of your daily environment, your brain reacts differently. It starts paying attention. It starts recognizing patterns faster because repetition is no longer rare. It becomes normal. This is the difference between learning a language and living with it. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to move to another country. You need frequency, small, repeated exposure throughout the day, moments that feel natural, not forced. While walking, while eating, while resting, let English exist in the background. Not everything needs full focus. Even passive listening has value because your brain is always processing sound. Even when you think you're not learning, it is still absorbing. But there is one rule. What you hear must make sense. If it's too difficult, your brain disconnects. If it's too simple, your brain gets bored. You need that balance, where you understand enough, but still feel curious. That's where learning accelerates. And over time, something shifts. English stops feeling foreign. The sounds become familiar. The rhythm feels natural. You no longer hear noise. You hear meaning. And once meaning becomes clear, your brain starts predicting what comes next. This is how fluency begins to form, not from effort, but from exposure that repeats again and again until your brain accepts English as part of its environment. Chapter 5. Train your mouth to follow your ears. Understanding alone is not enough. Your brain may recognize patterns, but your mouth is not used to producing them. That's a different skill. And this is where many learners feel stuck. They understand a lot, but when they try to speak, their voice hesitates. Not because they don't know, but because their mouth is not trained yet. Speaking is physical. It's muscle memory. Your lips, your tongue, your breathing all need practice, but not through thinking, through imitation. Children don't think. Before they speak, they copy what they hear. They repeat sounds again and again until those sounds feel natural. This is how speech develops, not from knowledge, but from repetition of sound. So instead of building sentences in your head, start with imitation. Take short phrases you've heard many times. Listen closely, then repeat, not slowly, not perfectly, but naturally. Follow the rhythm, follow the tone, even if it feels messy, because your goal is not accuracy at first. It's familiarity. You are teaching your mouth how English moves, how it flows, how it connects. Words are not spoken one by one. They blend together. They stretch. They reduce. They link. And your mouth needs to experience that. The more you repeat, the more comfortable it becomes. At first, you may feel awkward. Your pronunciation may not be clear. That's normal because your muscles are not used to these sounds. But with repetition, they adjust. Slowly, your speech becomes smoother, more natural, less forced. You don't need long sessions, just short moments, repeated daily. Consistency builds fluency, not intensity. And over time, something changes. You stop thinking about how to say things. You just say them because your ears and your mouth are finally connected. Chapter 6. Stop chasing perfection. Start using patterns. There is another trap that slows you down, the need to be perfect. You want correct grammar, perfect pronunciation, flawless sentences. So before you speak, you check everything in your head. Is this right? Is this correct? Did I say it properly? And in that moment, you stop because perfection creates hesitation, and hesitation breaks flow. Language is not built through perfection. It is built through repetition. Children don't wait to be correct. They speak with what they have. Sometimes it's wrong, sometimes incomplete, but they keep going. And over time, their brain adjusts, not by rules, but by patterns. They hear something often, and it becomes natural. They don't memorize. They recognize. This is how fluency works, not through thinking, but through familiarity. So instead of focusing on correctness, focus on patterns, whole phrases, complete ideas, things you've heard many times. I'm not sure. I think so. Let me try. These are not constructed from grammar. They are remembered as units. And because they are familiar, they come out faster, without stress, without analysis. This is what you need. Not perfect sentences, but usable patterns. When you rely on patterns, your brain moves quicker. Your speech becomes smoother. You stop translating because you are not building. You are recalling, and recalling is faster than thinking. So, let go of perfection. Allow mistakes. Use what you know, even if it's simple, because simplicity creates flow, and flow creates confidence, and confidence keeps you speaking. Over time, your patterns expand. Your accuracy improves, naturally, not because you forced it, but because your brain has seen it enough times. And now, it simply knows what sounds right. Chapter 7. Memory is built on emotion, not repetition alone. You can hear something 100 times and still forget it. But sometimes, you hear something once, and it stays forever. Why? Because your brain does not remember everything equally. It remembers what feels meaningful, what feels emotional, what feels real. Most learners focus only on repetition. Repeat words, repeat sentences, repeat lessons. But without emotion, those memories fade quickly because the brain does not see them as important. Children don't learn language through dry repetition. They learn through experience, through moments, through feelings, through interaction. A word is not just a word. It's connected to a situation, a reaction, a need, a feeling. That's why it stays. Now think about how you usually learn. Lists of vocabulary, isolated sentences, abstract examples. There is no emotion, no context. So, your brain lets it go. If you want to remember English, you need to make it meaningful, not just understandable, but relatable. Watch content that interests you, stories, conversations, situations you care about. Because when you care, you pay attention. And attention creates memory. Also, connect language to your own life. Don't just hear a phrase. Imagine using it. Picture the situation. Feel the context. Turn language into experience. Even small emotion helps. Curiosity, surprise, enjoyment. These signals tell your brain, this matters. And when something matters, it stays longer. So don't just repeat blindly. Engage with what you hear. Understand it. Feel it. Relate to it. Because language is not information. It's experience. And once your brain starts treating English as something real, not something academic, your memory changes. Words stop disappearing. Patterns become familiar. And learning becomes deeper without extra effort. Chapter 8. Consistency creates fluency, not motivation. You don't need more motivation. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to feel inspired every day because motivation comes and goes. Some days you feel excited. You want to learn. Other days you feel tired, distracted, and you stop. That's why so many people start learning English, but never continue, not because they lack ability, but because they rely on motivation. And motivation is unstable. What you need instead is consistency, small actions, repeated daily, even when you don't feel like it, because your brain does not need intensity. It needs frequency, short exposure, again and again. That's what builds real change. Think about children. They don't learn language in long sessions. They learn through daily exposure, every day, every moment. Slow, but constant. That's why it works. So, instead of asking, how much should I study today? Ask, how can I make this a daily habit? Keep it simple. Listen for a few minutes. Repeat a few phrases. Engage with one piece of content. That's enough, because consistency multiplies over time. One day doesn't matter, but 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that changes everything. And here's something important. Progress will feel slow at first. You may not notice big changes, but your brain is adapting quietly, building patterns, strengthening connections, until one day something shifts. You understand faster. You respond easier. You don't hesitate, like before, not because you tried harder, but because you stayed consistent. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Just show up again and again and again, because fluency is not built in moments of motivation. It's built in moments of repetition that you choose to continue.